The sun hammered down on San Paloma with a heat that cracked wood and boiled silence. Not a single bird dared to sing. Dust shimmered in the air, floating like ghosts above the square. At the center, bound to the old post where drunks were once tied for shame, stood Leah, her wrists raw from the rope. Her white blouse clung with sweat, her face streaked with dust. She did not lower her head. Her eyes, blue, fierce, stared back at the townsfolk who dared not meet her gaze. The well stood only a few feet away. A single bucket hung over it, bone dry, a rope frayed by too many desperate hands. Children licked their lips, old men shifted, waiting for someone to speak the words they were afraid of. And then they came. The accusation. She poisoned the well. The words cut the silence sharper than any blade. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, whispers like rattlesnakes in tall grass. No one saw it happen, but fear doesn't wait for proof. Fear is faster. A boy spat into the dirt. A woman pulled her daughter closer. Every eye was a noose tightening around Leah's neck. She raised her chin. Her voice rang out, steady, as if defying the desert itself. I did not touch the water. You know it. The sheriff did not answer. His hand lingered on his belt buckle where the badge shone dull against the dust. He wasn't paid to listen. He was paid to deliver. And by morning, Leah would be on the road, shackled, bound for the judge in Santa Fe. But in the shadows of the saloon, a man leaned against the rail, hat low, eyes unreadable. Jonas Vale, ex-scout, ex-soldier, a man who trusted iron more than words. He watched her as if weighing stone in his hand. The town believed the well was cursed. Jonas knew curses had names, and before this road ended, someone would pay for every drop of water San Paloma had lost. Nas Vale stepped out of the saloon's shadow like a man carved from dust and silence. His boots struck the ground with slow certainty, each step echoing through the tense square. People parted without being asked. They knew his type, a man who carried death at his hip and answers in his eyes. The sheriff motioned toward Leah. She's yours. Take her to Santa Fe. Let the judge decide. Jonas didn't speak. He only studied the ropes on her wrists, then the dry well that loomed behind her. The air shimmered, carrying the scent of thirst itself. A barkeep hurried out, holding a tin cup filled with what little water he had left. For the road, he said, offering it to Jonas. Jonas glanced at the cup and pushed it away. His voice, when it came, was low, rasped by years of smoke and desert. Water that's for sale ain't worth drinking. The townsfolk shifted nervously. Leah's eyes flicked toward him, searching for a crack in his stone face. She found none. The sheriff grunted. She'll fight you. Don't let her talk. Her lies spread faster than fire. Jonas ignored him. With a flick of his knife, he cut Leah free from the post, only to bind her again with his own iron shackles. Chains clinked as they tightened around her wrists. For a moment, their eyes met. Hers burned with defiance. His, cold and unreadable, carried something else. Recognition, maybe even doubt. He pulled her forward. We ride at dawn. The crowd scattered as he led her past the dry well. Leah stumbled once, the metal biting her skin, but she did not fall. She refused to. Behind them, a child whispered, "If the well's cursed, why's the merchant's barrel still full?" The words were swallowed by silence, but Jonas heard. He always heard. His jaw tightened, eyes narrowing. Curses were easy to blame. Men with too much water, those were harder to ignore. And as the sun bled into the horizon, Jonas knew one truth. He might be carrying a prisoner, but something in San Paloma stank worse than poisoned water. The desert swallowed sound at night. No church bells, no dogs barking, just the slow groan of the wind dragging dust across the empty road. Jonas and Leah rode in silence, the creak of saddle leather the only rhythm between them. By midnight, they stopped near a dry mesquite grove. Jonas tethered the horses and struck a small fire, its glow painting his face in shifting orange. Leah sat opposite him, wrists bound, shadows flickering across her sharp cheekbones. "You think silence makes you strong," she said, her voice low. "But silence is how men like Mora steal water and sell it back." Jonas didn't answer. He chewed dried jerky, eyes fixed on the fire. But in the wind, something pricked his ears, metal clinking where no saddle should be. He froze. The fire hissed as he pressed it down with his boot, killing the flame. Darkness swallowed them whole. Leah stiffened. "What is it?" Jonas drew his revolver, his voice barely more than breath. "We're not alone." Then they heard it. A faint ringing. Bells. Mules. Somewhere in the dark. But no footsteps. No men guiding them. Just the hollow jingle drifting on the wind. Leah's face hardened. They're counting. Counting barrels. Jonas scanned the black horizon. 3 shadows on horseback moved against the stars, circling wide, never closing in. Watching. Measuring. His finger curled on the trigger, but he didn't fire. Predators didn't show teeth unless forced. The riders melted back into the dark, leaving only the whisper of hooves. Silence returned, but heavier now, weighted with menace. Leah leaned closer, her chains glinting. "You see it now, don't you? This isn't a curse. It's a theft. And if you keep pretending you don't care, you'll end up thirsting with the rest of them." Jonas holstered the gun, jaw clenched, eyes still searching the horizon. He didn't answer her. But for the first time, doubt gnawed at the edges of his silence. Dawn burned red across the desert as Jonas and Leah rode into San Paloma's outlying trade post, Weller's General Store. The sign creaked in the dry wind, letters peeling, but inside the shelves sagged with goods that no thirsty town should have. Barrels, stacked high, sealed tight, sweating cool in the heat. Water, more than enough to drown the whole accusation. Weller, a plump man with soft hands and a smile too wide, waddled out to greet them. "Sheriff said you'd be passing through. Supplies for the road." His eyes lingered on Leah's shackles, then flicked away, pretending disinterest. Jonas didn't answer. His gaze moved to the floorboards. A white crust sparkled faintly in the cracks. Salt residue. He crouched, rubbing it between his fingers. The taste was sharp. Evaporated water. Leah caught it too. Her voice, steady but sharp, cut through the store. "Strange, isn't it? A cursed well runs dry, and yet your barrels are overflowing." Weller chuckled nervously. "Trade secret. Found a spring out west." Jonas stood, his shadow falling heavy across the merchant. Springs don't leave salt on the floor. For a heartbeat, silence stretched. Then Weller's smile cracked. "You're just passing through. Best not to dig too deep, Vale." His tone carried something more than warning. It carried ownership, the confidence of a man protected by bigger hands. Jonas's eyes narrowed. He walked past the merchant, brushing his fingers over a barrel's rim. Damp, recently filled. He tapped the lid, hollow echo, sloshing water. Behind the counter, a ledger lay open. Jonas's hand closed it before Weller could move. Receipts scrawled in black ink, dozens of shipments marked HM. Leah leaned in close, whispering, "Enrique Mora." The name hung in the air like a noose. Jonas closed the book, eyes hard as stone. He didn't say a word. But the truth was spilling, clearer than any poisoned well. And somewhere beyond San Paloma, men with empty canteens were dying while barrels stacked in Weller's store kept a secret that could burn the desert to ash. Night fell heavy over San Paloma. Jonas and Leah had slipped away from Weller's store before the merchant's eyes could tighten the noose. Now they crouched near the old blacksmith's ruins, where the ground was littered with scorched timbers and half-buried nails that glowed dull in the moonlight. Jonas pressed his palm against the earth, warm, too warm for midnight desert air. He brushed aside sand until wood appeared, freshly charred, the kind that hadn't seen daylight in years. Leah knelt beside him, chains rattling. "What do you see?" she whispered. Jonas's knife pried up the plank. Beneath it, darkness yawned. A tunnel. He lowered the lantern, revealing tracks in the dust, drag marks, grooves of barrels rolled underground. Leah's voice sharpened. "They're bleeding the town dry from beneath its feet." Before Jonas could answer, a sharp whistle cut the air. Then, gunfire. Splinters exploded from the beam above their heads. Shadows burst from the scrub, rifles flashing in the night. Jonas shoved Leah down, returning fire in 2 crisp shots. One man fell, another cursed, clutching his shoulder. But more came, their faces masked in bandanas marked with the crow's sigil. The tunnel mouth hissed with movement, barrels rolling, pushed deeper into the dark. Jonas's jaw tightened. He aimed low, firing into the barrel's rim. Wood cracked, water spilling in a silver arc across the dirt. The attackers froze, their secret bleeding out for all to see. Leah seized the moment, snatching up a fallen pistol. Her chains clinked as she leveled it with both hands. The shot rang wild but true enough to drive another rider back into the shadows. The skirmish ended as suddenly as it began. Silence, broken only by the hiss of water soaking sand. Jonas stood, chest heaving, eyes on the tunnel. They'll burn this place before letting the truth out. Leah, still holding the pistol, lifted her chin. Then we burn their lies first. Above them, smoke curled into the starless sky, carrying the promise of a war San Paloma could no longer ignore. By morning, San Paloma was already humming with rumor. Whispers of gunfire in the blacksmith's ruins, whispers of barrels spilling water where none should exist. And in every whisper, one name, Leah. Jonas led her through the town square in chains, though now the eyes that followed weren't filled with scorn. They burned with doubt. Mothers clutching empty buckets, ranchers with cracked lips, children watching with hollow stares. The well stood behind them, bone dry, its stones white with thirst. Sheriff Duarte waited at the gallows post, hand resting on his revolver. His badge gleamed, but his eyes were heavy, tired. He looked at Leah, then at Jonas. "You were meant to be halfway to Santa Fe," the sheriff said. Jonas didn't flinch. "We found something else on the road." He tossed the merchant's ledger at the sheriff's boots. Pages flapped open, ink fresh. Mora's initials burned into every shipment. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Duarte's jaw clenched, but he didn't bend down to look. He only kicked the book aside, as if it were dirt. "Careful what stones you turn, Vale," the sheriff muttered. "Some snakes ain't meant to be stirred." Leah stepped forward, chains rattling. Her voice cut sharp across the square. "Tell them, Sheriff. Tell them why Weller has full barrels while their children choke on dust. Tell them whose hand feeds you salt instead of water." The crowd pressed closer, voices rising, anger mounting like storm clouds. Duarte's hand hovered near his gun, but he didn't draw. His silence was louder than bullets. Jonas watched him, unreadable, before turning to the people. The sheriff won't speak, but the truth already has. A bucket toppled in the crowd. A child shouted, "Mora steals our water!" Then another, "The well ain't cursed, it's robbed!" The square erupted, fury boiling over. The sheriff took one step back, his badge glinting weakly in the sun. And in that step, San Paloma learned the truth. The law had no voice left. The night came alive with smoke. From the ridge above San Paloma, orange tongues licked the sky, and the acrid stench of burning wood rolled down like a storm. Jonas and Leah reached Weller's store first. Flames chewed through the roof, barrels stacked inside bursting one by one. Each detonation hissed as water boiled, steam clouding the firelight. What should have saved the town was being erased in smoke. Weller stumbled out, coughing, his fat frame silhouetted in firelight. They said it was the only way." His words broke between wheezes. Jonas caught him by the collar, dragging him clear of the blaze. "Who?" Jonas demanded. Weller's eyes darted, terrified. "Mora's riders. Said the sheriff wouldn't stop them. Said the evidence had to burn." Another barrel exploded, showering the night with sparks. Leah's face gleamed with sweat and fury. "They're not just stealing water. They're burying the truth." Shouts echoed down the street. Townsfolk gathered, buckets in hand, desperate to fight the flames. But the fire was too strong, spreading from roof to roof, sparks leaping like vultures. Then hoofbeats thundered. Mora's riders stormed into town, rifles raised. Not here to help, here to silence. Jonas shoved Leah behind a trough as bullets tore through glass. He fired back, one shot dropping a rider clean from his saddle. The townsfolk scattered, some screaming, some standing frozen between fear and fury. A rider swung a torch, hurling it toward the apothecary's thatched roof. Flames bloomed instantly, lighting the street in hellish glow. Leah snatched a bucket, hurling water to dampen the spread, her chains clanking as if mocking the effort. Jonas's revolver clicked empty. He reloaded with practiced calm, eyes narrowing. The town was at a breaking point, between surrendering to fire or rising in defiance. Over the roar of flames, Leah shouted, voice carrying like a bell, "They burn proof because they fear it. If San Paloma stays silent tonight, the fire won't stop until it swallows us all." Her words struck like flint. Faces turned, rage sharpened, and for the first time, the townsfolk didn't look away. The square burned red with firelight. Mora's riders circled like wolves, rifles cracking, torches hissing as they lit roof after roof. San Paloma's people cowered in doorways, clutching children and buckets, torn between terror and fury. Jonas crouched behind a trough, revolver smoking, eyes darting. Leah stood beside him, chains rattling as she shouted into the chaos. "They steal your water, burn your homes, and call it law. Will you let them?" For a moment, silence trembled. The riders sneered, certain fear would smother every voice. Then a single stone flew. It struck a rider's jaw, knocking him sideways from his saddle. The crowd gasped. The rider roared in rage, raising his rifle. But before he could fire, another stone cracked against his chest, then another. A chorus of shouts rose. Buckets became weapons, pitchforks raised, knives drawn from kitchens. Mothers and fathers, once silent, surged into the street like a tide. Jonas fired again, covering their charge. A rider toppled, torch falling into the dirt. Leah ripped the fallen rifle from his hand, snapping the chains on her wrists against the iron barrel until they shattered loose. Her arms free at last, she raised the rifle high. "No more chains," she cried. The townsfolk roared in answer. Shots rang wild. A rider fell beneath a flurry of fists and stones. Another was dragged from his horse, his torch stamped out under heavy boots. The fire still raged, but so did the people. For every spark Mora's men lit, a dozen voices rose louder, fiercer. One rider broke ranks, spurring his horse to flee into the night. Another followed. Panic spread among the rest, their smirks gone, replaced by doubt. Jonas's voice cut through the chaos, steady as iron. "This is only the beginning. They'll return with Mora himself." Leah lowered the rifle, her blue eyes glowing in the firelight. "Then let him come." Tonight San Paloma remembered its voice. The crowd stood behind her, unbroken, the square echoing with the sound of a town that had finally chosen to fight. At dawn, the desert was still, save for the thunder of hooves. Dust plumed behind a column of riders, black coats snapping in the wind. At their head rode Enrique Mora, the Baron of Water, his hat low, his eyes sharp as steel. A courier had reached him in the night, breathless, bloodied, rambling of San Paloma's uprising. Mora had listened in silence, pouring himself a glass of clear water from a silver flask. Then, without a word, he mounted his stallion. Now, he rode with 20 men at his back. Each carried a torch bound to the saddle, rifles across their chests. Where they passed, villages shut their doors, mothers pulling children from windows. The very earth seemed to hush as Mora's shadow stretched long. At his side, Captain Silvera leaned close. "If the town won't bow, we burn it." "Make an example." Mora's lips curved, not in a smile but something colder. "No, fire is for the weak. San Paloma needs a lesson carved in stone, not ash." He lifted a folded contract from his coat, its seal gleaming crimson. "We'll bind them with this first. If they resist, then they'll choke on their own smoke." Behind him, the riders barked cruel laughter. The Crow Company's brand was law where law had rotted. Far ahead, the silhouette of San Paloma shimmered in the rising heat. Mora reined in his stallion, letting his men spread wide across the ridge. His gaze swept the valley, lingering on the dry well that marked the town's heart. "Their voices rose last night," he said, his words slow, deliberate. "Today, we'll see if they can still speak with my boot on their neck." He snapped his reins. The stallion reared, neighing, hooves striking sparks against stone. With a roar, Mora's men surged down the ridge, dust swallowing them whole. San Paloma had kindled defiance. Mora was coming to smother it. The bell of San Paloma tolled once, heavy and hollow. By the second toll, Mora's riders had filled the square, their black coats dripping dust and menace. Mothers dragged children into doorways. Fathers stood stiff, empty-handed, watching. The flames of last night had left scars across rooftops, smoke still clinging to the air. At the center, beside the dry well, Mora dismounted. His boots struck the dirt with the weight of a gavel. He unrolled a parchment sealed in crimson wax, raising it high. "By the authority of the Crow Company," his voice thundered, "San Paloma stands in breach. Your debts have doubled. Your well, your homes, your very labor, all pledged until the last drop of water is repaid." He let the words sink like stones into silence. Then slowly, he pressed the paper to the well's rim, pinning it with a dagger. The contract fluttered in the breeze, crimson seal glaring like an open wound. The sheriff stood nearby, silent, his badge dim in the morning light. Leah stepped forward, rifle across her back, chains broken at her wrists. Gasps rippled as townsfolk whispered her name. Her blue eyes locked on Mora. Paper won't feed their children. Paper won't quench their thirst. She jabbed a finger toward the well. "You bind them with lies, Mora, but lies burn easier than wood." Mora's smile was thin, almost pitying. "Then burn it, girl, and see how quick I write another." The crowd shifted, anger bubbling, fear clinging like dust. Jonas moved to her side, hand on his revolver, his voice low but steady. "They're listening now. Don't waste it." Leah drew a breath, lifting her voice so all could hear. "You call this law? I call it chains. If San Paloma bows today, we'll bow forever. But if we break this lie—" She seized the parchment, tearing it from the dagger. "Then no chain will hold us again." The contract ripped in her hands. The square erupted. Gasps, shouts, fists raised. Mora's eyes narrowed, fury flickering like a storm about to break. San Paloma had crossed a line, and Mora would not forgive it. For a heartbeat, the square held its breath. Torn parchment drifted like snow. The red seal split in two. Mora's gaze followed it as though watching a crown tumble into the dirt. Then his voice cracked the silence. "Burn them." Rifles snapped to shoulders. Torches hissed as riders struck flint. The sheriff flinched but did not move. The first shot split the air. Splinters burst from a wagon post inches from a boy's head. Screams erupted. Mothers clutched children, men dove for cover. But before panic could swallow the square, a stone flew again. Then another. The townsfolk hurled buckets, bricks, whatever their hands found. Jonas's revolver barked, dropping one rider from his saddle. "Hold the line!" he roared. His voice cut through the chaos like steel. Leah stepped into the open, rifle in her hands, her turquoise beads flashing in the sunlight. She fired once, twice, each shot precise, forcing the riders back. Chains no longer bound her wrists, but the sound of her defiance rang louder than gunfire. A torch arced toward the grain store. Leah sprinted, snatching it from the dirt before it struck the roof. She turned, flame in hand, eyes blazing. "You want fire?" she shouted. "Then choke on it!" With a fierce cry, she hurled the torch back, straight into a rider's coat. He fell screaming, his comrades reeling. The crowd surged. Farmers with pitchforks, blacksmiths with hammers, mothers wielding kitchen blades. They crashed into Mora's men, not soldiers but a storm. Dust and blood filled the square. The sound of fists on flesh, steel on wood, voices rising in fury. Mora did not flinch. He stood by the well, watching the chaos unfold, his gloved hand resting lightly on his pistol. Calm, patient, as if this bloodshed was already written. Leah met his eyes across the square. Firelight flickered between them. Her voice carried above the din. "This is not your town anymore." For the first time, Mora's jaw tightened. The square was a storm of dust, fire, and screams. Townsfolk and riders clashed in brutal chaos, pitchfork against rifle butt, hammer against saber. Smoke from smoldering torches coiled upward, choking the morning air. Through it all, Mora stood untouched beside the well, his black coat unmarked, his calm a blade sharper than any steel. He watched as his men faltered under the fury of San Paloma. as if calculating the exact moment to strike. Leah cut her way through the square, rifle empty now, wielded like a staff. Chains that once shackled her wrists now wrapped her forearm, each strike ringing like iron against iron. Jonas followed at her side, revolver firing until the last chamber clicked hollow. At last, the battle thinned, opening a circle around the well. The townsfolk pressed back, breathless, bloodied, but unyielding. Mora stepped into the center, drawing his pistol with glacial precision. "You tear paper and think yourselves free," he said, his voice carrying above the silence. "But law is not parchment, it is power, and I am the hand that writes it." Leah faced him, chest heaving, eyes blazing. "Then break your hand here, Mora." Gasps rippled. Jonas tensed, ready to throw himself between them. Mora raised his pistol, steady, aimed at her heart. For a breath, time froze. The crowd held still, chains of fear tightening. Then, a voice rose from the crowd. "No more!" A stone flew. It struck Mora's wrist, snapping his shot wide. The bullet screamed past Leah's shoulder into the dirt. Shouts erupted. Dozens of hands hurled rocks, bottles, iron scraps. Mora staggered under the hail, his pistol knocked loose, his coat torn. Leah surged forward, seizing him by the collar. The chains on her arm rattled as she pressed his back against the well. "You call yourself law," she spat, voice trembling with fury, "but you're nothing but thirst dressed in black." The crowd roared, their fear finally shattered. Mora's empire cracked in that instant, the breaking point of San Paloma. Mora struggled, dust streaking his once pristine coat. The dagger he had used to pin the contract still jutted from the well's rim. Leah tore it free and pressed the blade to his throat. "Your paper chains end here," she said, her voice steady as steel. The square hushed. Townsfolk pressed close, their faces lit by the smoldering flames around them. Jonas held the line, revolver raised, ready to strike should Mora's men lunge. But they didn't. One by one, rifles lowered. The tide had turned. Mora's lips curled, even with the dagger at his neck. "Kill me, and the Crow Company will send 10 more in my place, stronger, richer. The law does not die with me." Leah's blue eyes burned. "Then let the law choke on this." She ripped the contract from his coat, the crimson seal cracking under her fingers. She lifted it high for all to see. Then, with a single motion, she tore it in half, then quarters, then flung the shreds into the fire at her feet. The parchment curled, blackened, and vanished in smoke. The crowd erupted. Cheers, sobs, fists thrust skyward. Chains had been broken not by fire or blade alone, but by truth made visible. Mora snarled, lunging. Jonas was faster. His revolver's barrel struck Mora across the jaw, sending him sprawling against the well. Blood ran from his lip, his pistol lost. The sheriff stepped forward at last, badge dull but voice carrying. "Henrique Mora, you stand stripped of claim and power. San Paloma answers no more to you, or your company." Mora's eyes flicked to the crowd, to Leah, to Jonas. For the first time there was fear. The people surged. Rough hands bound his wrists, dragging him to the ground he had once ruled. Leah raised her chain-wrapped arm high. "The last contract has burned. From this day, San Paloma drinks free." The roar that followed shook the very dust from the church eaves. The well stood silent, but hope ran deeper than water. Dawn broke over San Paloma, soft and golden, spilling across the battered square. Smoke still drifted from charred timbers, and the scars of battle clung to every wall. But for the first time in memory, the air was not heavy with fear. The townsfolk gathered around the old stone well, its rim blackened by fire and violence. Leah stood at its edge, the broken chain still wrapped around her forearm, glinting in the morning sun. Beside her, Jonas rested a weary hand on his revolver, eyes scanning the horizon where Mora's riders had fled. The sheriff approached, his badge tarnished but his voice steady. "The company will come looking," he said quietly. "They'll find nothing here but free people," Leah answered, her words carrying farther than the bell ever had. An old man stepped forward with a bucket, rope frayed and patched. For a moment, the crowd held its breath as he lowered it into the dark. The pulley squealed, echoing across the hushed square. Then, a splash. Gasps rippled, hands clutched mouths. Children pressed closer. The bucket rose, dripping, heavy with clear water that shimmered in the new light. A cheer erupted, wild and unrestrained. Mothers dipped cloths to press against their children's lips. Men lifted the bucket high, letting the water fall in silver arcs over their faces. Laughter mixed with tears, washing the dust of fear away. Leah dipped her hands into the cool stream, droplets streaking down her scarred wrists. She looked at the crowd, at Jonas, at the sky above. "This is our covenant now," she said, voice firm but bright. "Not chains, not contracts, only water, and the will to keep it ours." The people roared again, a sound that carried beyond the desert ridges. San Paloma, once a town shackled by thirst and fear, had found its voice, and with the first water, it was reborn.